Australia. A secluded island continent with an abundance of creatures found nowhere else in the world. Among them, many species of animals with pouches, known as marsupials. One shares a common ancestor with the koala, but is far less widely known. Meet the wombats. With their thick-set, low-slung bodies, wombats look like small bears. But these slow-moving and solitary creatures are elusive burrow dwellers, whose best form of defence is their backside. They live in a world where night is their day, poop is cubed, and looking for a place to sleep provokes some sudden flashes of temper. This is the secret life of the wombat. Close to the cool highlands of the Snowy Mountains in southeast Australia lies a secret world. Within these sun-dappled groves live a group of very special creatures. Benny is just one of the many bare-nosed or common wombats living here. He's been named by the conservationists who protect and observe this area, known as Wombat Wood. The wombats here share this expanse of trees and dense foliage, thriving on the temperate climate and moist habitat. The wood is a place of peaceful refuge. And for any wombat, the safest place of all is his burrow. There are around 100 burrows in Wombat Wood, where the wombats will sleep during the warmth of the day. Wombats are some of the largest burrowing mammals in the world. They like to tunnel into areas of uncovered earth, beneath the roots of trees, or under the sides of rocks. While a burrow usually only has one main entrance, underground there are tunnels up to 3 meters long. These open into cool chambers where the wombats snooze. Millie is unable to regulate her body temperature when the outside is over 25 degrees Celsius. So, like any wombat, she'll stay in her cool subterranean sanctuary until the temperature drops in the late afternoon. The lack of oxygen in a burrow, combined with a slow metabolism, will keep Millie sleepy. Wombats can sometimes stay in their burrows for as long as 19 hours at a time. Only once the outside temperatures match the cooler conditions of her burrow will Millie emerge. Millie is behaving cautiously and comes out backwards, presenting her toughest side to any potential predator, such as a fox or dingo. Her rear end is actually her best defence. She has a tiny concealed tail, and her rump is fortified with a solid cartilage plate and skin up to 1 centimetre thick, which acts as protection against a bite. If need be, Millie can barricade the burrow by jamming her back against the roof, potentially trapping and suffocating a predator against the walls. Once she's emerged, Millie remains vigilant to the burrow entrance until she's sure it's safe to move. Meanwhile, Benny is a more confident wombat and wastes no time in emerging face first from his burrow set under a tree trunk. Wombats come in varying shades of grey and brown, but Benny is distinctively dark. At 5 years old, he's also one of the most assertive males in Wombat Wood. As mostly solitary animals, wombats don't have a clearly defined social hierarchy. But Benny may fight over food or mates, and the battle scars on his right leg point to past run-ins with other males. He's heading straight for foraging. Benny has a classic wombat's heavy gait. His legs are short and his feet are plantigrade, meaning he walks with his whole foot flat on the ground. Typical of an animal that walks more than it runs. His back feet have 2 fused digits and a clawless stub, which are used both for digging and scratching off dust. Wombats can take their time heading out to forage, sniffing the air and taking in the sounds of the wood, often waiting near the burrow entrance for a while. Millie's eyesight is poor as she spends so much of her time in the dark, so she'll rely on her other senses to check for predators. Millie's ears set on the side of her head are well placed to collect sound efficiently. But above all, she'll rely on her sense of smell. She has a keen olfactory system, and the openings of her nostrils and nasal passages are both extremely large. Once she's reassured of her safety, Millie moves away from the burrow. Sniffing as she goes, Millie starts to venture further. Benny heads towards the open pastures at the edge of the wood where he can feed. This is part of the area where he lives, travels, feeds and scratches, known as a home range. A wombat's home range can cover as much as 25 hectares, but if there are good places to burrow and plenty of grass, it can be a lot smaller. And it will also overlap with lots of other wombats. He may not care to interact with them, but Benny will be familiar with the wombats that share his home range. And he'll know if there's an intruder on his patch. Male wombats may not fight over territory, but they will compete over mating or the best feeding spots. Older male Benny likes to check out who's been around. Other wombats will have left him messages with their droppings or scats. And then it's his turn to leave a calling card, both for other male wombats and to let the ladies know he dropped by. Wombat poop is unusual. It's very dry due to their fibrous diet and cube-shaped. Benny can lay up to 100 compact pellets a night using special bones in his backside to form the scats into cubes. The shape helps them stay in position and not roll away. It's likely that Benny's cuboid communication gives other wombats information on how big he is, his age and breeding condition, and may warn other wombats not to feed in his preferred spots. While younger, less assertive males will leave their offerings in a more concealed setting, a dominant wombat like Benny will make sure his superior scats are left in prominent places so they can't be missed. Because his sense of smell is so much better than his eyesight, his scats may also serve as landmarks so he can smell where he's been. Once upon a time, Ken would have asserted himself by moving all around the wood to lay droppings. At around 35 kilos, he's a large wombat, and his ragged ears suggest he hasn't always led a quiet life. But now, at 15 years of age, he's retired from mating and lives right on the edge of his old home range. A wombat can live as long as 20 years. He likes to check out who might be near his burrow. But mostly he spends his time foraging and scratching. Scratching is a form of grooming. He won't lick his fur like other mammals. Instead, he'll scratch the dust off after sleeping in his earthy burrow. He can reach most parts of his body with his front or hind paws. And rubbing against a branch or tree trunk is always popular. As a herbivore forager, Benny's in search of a variety of grasses, moss and tree bark. He's happy eating tough, fibrous plants, difficult to eat and to digest. Benny's teeth are tailored to match his diet. They are rootless and never stop growing, so they won't be worn away by constant grinding. He can also use his sharp claws to dig up roots and his long incisors to bite through them whole. Digesting tough grasses also means that Benny's metabolism is slow, particularly when resting for long periods in the burrow. It can take him between 8 and 14 days to fully digest, which can be useful when food and water are scarce. Benny moves very slowly around the wood. He's constantly cautious, smelling warily as he goes. A whiff of anything unfamiliar will put him on his guard. And if he's uncertain or something startles him, he reacts at surprising speed. Wombats may be ponderous and slow movers, but when they need to, they can run. They can accelerate up to 40 kilometres an hour in seconds and keep it up for short distances, usually to head to the safety of a nearby burrow. While wombats may have a home range, they don't depend on using the same burrow each day. If a wombat needs a place of refuge or a bed for the night, he will often head to the closest place he can find. Teenage wombat Alabama has currently bagged one of the best burrows in the area. It's well positioned in the roots of a tree in the middle of the wood and has a wide entrance with plenty of cover. Alabama has distinctive front teeth. But that's not the only thing about him that's unusual. Even while burrow hopping, most wombats prefer to keep their burrows single occupancy. But Alabama has a roommate. His burrow buddy is another male, 3-year-old Boston. He's like Alabama's little brother. Alabama's always the first out of the burrow. He's the one to take the lead. And when he gives the go-ahead, the much more timid wombat joins him. But before they go anywhere, they must make sure the coast is clear. And that can take a while. The light is fading by the time they venture out. These boys have an unusually close friendship for wombats, and that may be due to their start in life. They were both found as orphans and were hand-reared and later returned to the wild together. Without mothers to give them the security and confidence a baby wombat would normally get, Alabama and Boston learned instead to rely on each other. Most wombats will feed no closer than 3 meters to another wombat. As darkness falls, wherever Alabama goes, Boston is close behind him. Under the cover of darkness, all is quiet in the wood. The wombats find their way about, stopping to listen and smelling the air as they wander and forage through the night. They will generally avoid each other and use their sense of smell to keep their distance. As the first fingers of morning sunlight spread their way across the wood, it's time for the wombats to make their way back to their chosen burrows. Benny takes a last sniff of the morning air, then dives into the earthy burrow to settle down for his day's sleep. But while morning is bedtime for most wombats, one little wombat has got his clock upside down. Billy has recently weaned from his mum Millie and started living on his own. At just over a year old, he's young to have left his mother. This usually happens at around 18 months. Usually when young wombats leave home, they stay in their mother's home range. But Billy lives closer to the edge of the wood. He's still uncertain about independent life as an adult wombat. He prefers to come out of his burrow just as the other wombats are headed to bed. As a smaller, weaker wombat, Billy may be nervous of larger males and won't want to compete for feeding. So he emerges during daytime when he knows no other wombats will be about. He can take his time scratching, as he doesn't have far to go to feed. He's chosen a handy burrow with nutritious long grass growing near the entrance. Slowly, he braves moving further from the burrow. But he picks up the scent of something he doesn't like, most likely another wombat, and it's enough to see him scurrying home. Meanwhile, Alabama stands guard at the entrance to his burrow to ensure that no one else will be joining him and Boston in their chosen spot while they sleep. Picking up the scent of another wombat, he ventures out. It's Millie, who's checking to see if the burrow is vacant. Alabama hurriedly moves back to block the entrance. Millie's raised paw shows she's uncertain. She doesn't dare to approach any further. But she's not the only one with designs on this centrally located burrow. Older female wombat Wilma has moved away from the burrow she last used in search of better foraging. Suddenly, she's startled by passing kangaroos. She heads straight for the nearest burrow. But it's Alabama's. Wombat aggression is often verbal and enough to warn off a would-be squatter. And Alabama emerges to make double sure she's gone. Only now can he and Boston settle down to sleep. Winter has arrived in Wombat Wood. Being so close to the snowy mountains means that snowfall is not unusual here. The wombats' burrows are well equipped to cope with lower temperatures. Even when they drop below zero above ground, burrow temperatures will not go below 12 degrees Celsius. And the wombat's coarse fur and thick skin means that they can come out to feed even when there's snow on the ground. It's late afternoon. Benny's making use of the cooler weather to do some burrow maintenance. Wombats are amazing earth movers. Benny's solid feet and long claws mean he can shift a metre of dirt in a few hours, walking backwards out of the burrow to bulldoze the earth clear. He will drag in vegetation, including grass, twigs and leaves, to line his resting chamber. And while he stands around 25 centimetres tall at the shoulders, he can compress himself to squash through a 10 centimetre gap if he needs to. He emerges, spattered with sandy soil. He's cautious today, constantly sniffing the air. Picking up the scent of something dangerous, Benny hesitates. But hunger must be getting the better of him. Even though the danger he got a whiff of hasn't gone away. A fox is smaller than a wombat. The average bare-nosed wombat usually weighs around 30 kilos, whereas a fox is no more than 14 kilos. but a fox can still attack and give a wombat a nasty bite. In winter, foxes also like to shelter in wombats' burrows, spreading parasitic mites which can make the wombats ill. The fox spots him and veers away. Benny may be one of the most assertive males in the wood, but even he decides it's best to wait this one out. Only when he's certain that there's no threat does he cautiously come out and start his day all over again. As spring approaches, the winter snow gives way to rain. Lots of it. And the wombats take cover. Over 400 millimetres falls in just 2 days. The worst rains in living memory. Most of the wombats stay sheltering in their burrows. Few are willing to come out for long. Only Wilma is prepared to ignore the downpour to forage vigorously for several hours. Her thick fur affords her some protection, and the cool, damp conditions mean that she can come out earlier in the day, as she won't be at risk of getting too hot. The drenched grass here is a good way for Wilma to take in water. Wombats rarely drink. They only do so when there's not enough moisture in the plants. But even being well equipped for the weather doesn't tempt the other wombats to come outside. Heavy rain like this can pose problems for the wombats. Several of the burrows are completely flooded, including Alabama and Boston's coveted under-tree spot. It's not uncommon for wombats to die this way. Rising water can trap them in their sleeping chambers. But while some of the wombats need to find new burrows, Wilma remains unconcerned. She's come to no harm during the extreme weather and is still picking her way around patches of waterlogged ground to feed. As the sun finally reappears, the other wombats slowly start to emerge. Millie has moved to a new burrow on the outskirts of the wood. She's been doing some earth moving. The deluge means lots of burrow maintenance is needed to clear out the mud now that the water has seeped away. Millie's broad head with its strong skull and her powerful shoulders and legs mean she can make short work of moving large amounts of soil. She can even push rocks out of the way with her head if she needs to. Her eyes, set in the side of her head, offer some protection from the earth when she's digging. Millie keenly sniffs the air. The rains have breathed new life into the wood, leaving a whole range of aromas for a wombat's powerful sense of smell to sample. The reappearance of Alabama and Boston on higher ground confirms that they managed to get out before their burrow flooded. They spend time feeding together before checking out a new burrow. As the evening approaches, something extraordinary happens. Boston comes out without Alabama. He's testing out his independence. But he doesn't last long. He only forages for a short time before making his way back to Alabama. The days are getting warmer now, but the return of the sun doesn't herald brighter prospects for little Billy. He's moved to a burrow even further out of the wood. And appears more disoriented. He keeps foraging in the middle of the day, which is becoming increasingly risky. As the year rolls towards summer, this behaviour will make him more vulnerable. Unable to thermoregulate, he won't be able to cool himself easily if he gets too hot. And as the sun gets higher in the sky, it could be the heat that finally sends him dashing back to the burrow. Benny is also unharmed by the rains and is making up for lost time. Since his close shave with the fox, he's had the run of the wood. In one night, he can easily cover several kilometres. Wombats can spend longer above ground and extend their home ranges to take in more distant feeding areas before the temperatures rise during summer. After almost continuous grazing, Benny starts to eat more sporadically. Then he stops at a familiar spot to rest. Maybe he can stay here. But he doesn't head directly into the burrow. Only when he comes back out, it becomes clear what made Benny hesitate. Millie follows him out to let him know that he is not welcome here. When angered or threatened, a wombat can hiss or make a sound not unlike a pig's squeal. As an assertive male, Benny could be interested in mating Millie, but he retreats without a fight and is forced to set off in search of somewhere else to rest. He makes his way to another burrow. His sense of smell might tell him that there's someone home. But if he thinks he can force his way in, he's wrong. Once again, this visitor isn't welcome. And when the burrow owner appears, it's Alabama. And right behind him, Boston. But for Benny, it's going to be a long morning looking for a place he can call home. With most of the wombats safely in their burrows, all is quiet in Wombat Wood. Wherever they've chosen to rest, these solitary and elusive marsupial burrow dwellers can finally settle down for a day of slow digestion, energy preservation, and peaceful sleep. Australia, a secluded island continent with an abundance of creatures found nowhere else in the world. Among them, many species of animals with pouches, known as marsupials. Meet the wombats, chunky burrow dwellers, who carry their young in the pouch until they run out of room. Then raise their joeys in deep underground burrows. These slow-moving creatures are elusive and mostly solitary. But wombat breeding is a time of change, bringing out energy, aggression, and lots of play. And wherever Mum goes, Joey goes too. This is the secret life of the wombat. In a wood just outside Adelaide in the state of South Australia, female wombat Tara has come out of her burrow to forage. She's a southern hairy-nosed wombat, a variety with a pointed nose, adapted to live in the semi-arid conditions of the south. These wombats are increasingly rare. Tara is one of a small population here, which is named and protected by conservationists. It's late spring in Australia. Male wombat Birry is also out and about. But he's not thinking so much about foraging as finding a mate. And he's on Tara's trail. Birry picks up her scent. A female passes pheromones with her scats and urine about 4 to 5 days before she comes into oestrus. She may lay her cube-shaped poop in prominent places to advertise to the male that she'll soon be ready to mate. Wombats usually steer clear of each other. And Tara lets out a warning hiss. Before she darts away. Birry tries again. This time he goes to sniff her cloaca, the posterior opening where her scent glands are found. but she turns on him. A female wombat can become hostile if she comes into estrus. But that doesn't dissuade Birry, and the chase is on. Wombats are usually slow-moving animals, but if they need to, they can accelerate in bursts of energy. Chasing is part of the mating process and is often ritualised, with the wombats moving in wide circles. The female may let the male catch up with her, then scamper off again. Tara's loud squeals appear to be warning Birry off, but he's undeterred. His goal is to grasp her hindquarters with his front legs and then roll her on her side to mount her. He catches up with her and bites her on the backside. A wombat's rump is well protected by thick skin and is usually its first line of defence. He tries to get her steady, but she kicks against him with her powerful back legs. She may not be fully in estrus yet. Until she is, she won't be receptive to mating. Birry keeps up the aggressive biting. The marks are visible on her fur. But Tara evades him, and she disappears into her burrow. It's thought that wombats first appeared in Australia about 2 million years before the arrival of humans. The most common variety is the bare-nosed or common wombat, but even these are now only found in areas on the southeast coast, in New South Wales, Victoria, and the island state of Tasmania at the bottom of Australia. Narrantapoo National Park lies in the northeast of Tasmania. And there's a large population of common wombats living here. Wombats are mostly nocturnal, preferring to come out in the evening when temperatures are lower than 20 degrees Celsius. Most wombat mating takes place under the cover of darkness. Here in Tasmania, lying furthest south, it's cool in later winter and early spring. The wombats come out by day to eat the coarse, high-fibre grasses on the large areas of open pasture. Several of the females here have young, known as joeys, or are in the early stages of pregnancy. Wombats are mostly solitary creatures and can get aggressive when others encroach on their space. Females who are protecting their young can be particularly aggressive. This wombat, whose burrow is on the edge of the pasture, already has a joey tucked away in her pouch and isn't letting anything come near her. Her rasping hiss is a firm warning not to approach. She has strong senses of smell and hearing and may be able to detect a threat that isn't immediately evident. The baby she's protecting won't be visible for several months yet. Wombats are marsupials. Her tiny embryonic young was born after only about 22 days in uterus. At only 1.5 centimetres long, it will spend 8 months developing in the pouch before it makes its way into the world. The mother will remain on her guard throughout this time. Back near Adelaide, Birry has picked up the scent of a different female. Sylvie. He needs to establish whether she's in estrus. Hairy-nosed wombats breed when food is at its peak growth rates in spring, so the female will be able to supply milk to her young. In years of low rainfall, females may not come into estrus at all. The actual period of estrus is very short, as little as 13 hours. So Birry needs to be sure that the timing's right. Wombats only breed roughly every 2 years, so it's vital for the continuation of this rare variety that mating is successful. But Sylvie's not interested in playing chase. Wombats are among the world's largest tunnellers, and their usual form of defence in any situation is to run to the safety of the nearest burrow. If there isn't one at hand, they'll start to dig. Sylvie digs with the curved claws on her front paws to loosen the soil. Then uses her back legs to kick and push the soil away, while slowly moving backwards. A wombat female's pouch faces the rear. Inside, it's almost hairless and controlled by a powerful muscle which prevents any dirt from getting in as she digs. Wombats can shift a couple of metres of earth in a few hours, so it's not long before she has a place of her own. Southern hairy-nosed wombats will often mate inside the burrow, and Birry is keen to join Sylvie inside. But it takes a lot of work before a burrow's ready for occupation, and there's not enough space yet for Birry to join her. So he adopts a creative strategy and widens the burrow. But as he gets further in, she's still not interested. She reappears, then makes a run for it. Billy seizes his chance and occupies her burrow to await her return. In Cooma, near to the Snowy Mountains in southeast Australia, an orphan 3-month-old wombat has been taken in by an animal rescue.
You know it's coming there, don't you?
It's not normally possible to see a wombat joey until it emerges from the pouch at around 8 months. But little Ash was rescued from the pouch after her mother was killed by a car. Weighing just 250 grams, being hand-reared is Ash's only hope of survival. No bigger than a human hand, she's still completely furless and her eyes have only been open a short time. She would have stayed attached to her mother's teat in the pouch until about 4 months, and so she needs to be fed every 2 hours. Her neck and chest muscles are already well developed. The newborns of marsupials need to use their front legs and claws to grasp their mother's fur as they move from the birth canal to the pouch at just 3 weeks. The soles of her feet are pink. The pads on a wombat's feet become roughened by age and wear. This skin becomes black and leathery soon after joeys leave the pouch at 8 months. When not feeding, she must be kept tightly wrapped in covers. Joeys can't control their own temperature because Mum's pouch would normally do that for them. A second baby wombat, Dan, was found a few days before Ash and is a little larger at 350 grams. He's around 4 months old. His claws are already long and sharp in preparation for a life of digging. And his ears are extremely long. A wombat mother's pouch is lined with moist skin and provides a constantly warm environment for the growing joey. An orphan can lose water through the skin and become dehydrated, so Dan's body needs to be kept lubricated. He's more robust than little Ash and is already inquisitive. The joeys need to be fed on special low-lactose milk. Marsupial milk has a much higher protein and fat content than cow's milk. Near Narantapu National Park in Tasmania, there are several bare-nosed wombat mothers with young joeys, keeping them hidden from view. Winnie has a 4-month-old youngster in her pouch, which won't emerge for a while yet. She doesn't venture far from her burrow to forage. A key feature of bare-nosed wombat life is their tendency to move between different burrows in their home ranges, often grabbing the nearest one when they need to rest. But females prefer to stay in the same burrow when they have small pouch young. So Winnie sticks close to home to make sure that no other wombats drop by. And the best defence is occupation. In South Australia, hairy-nosed wombat Birry comes out of the burrow in search of his potential mating partner, Sylvie. This time, Sylvie's waiting for him, and she lets him sniff her. But only for a moment, before the chasing ritual begins again. But now, Sylvie's tactics have changed. She seems more receptive. She may have come into estrus and be ready for him to mate her. She returns to sniff Birry. Then breaks away for the burrow. And this time, she waits for him to follow her in. Finally, they end up in the burrow together. Once Birry has mated Sylvie, it will be the end of their association. Even if mating has been successful, he won't be involved in the rearing of his joey. Back at the Wombat Sanctuary in Cooma, New South Wales, and 3 weeks after they were found, Ash and Dan have grown. Ash has put on 250 grams, and it's the first time that the two orphan joeys have been put together. At 4 and nearly 5 months, both are still much too young to be out of the pouch. And the younger, Ash, is less able to move out of her protective covers. But Dan is beginning to move around. Even if that means sitting on his pouch mate. Both are still hairless, but Dan's skin is darkening where his fur is coming in. His eyes are also opening to a fuller shape. Ash's whiskers are already visible. These grow by 6 weeks in the pouch. Once fully grown, she'll have several sets of whiskers around her mouth and eyes and under her chin. She's also been found to have a fractured leg, most likely an injury from the accident that killed her mother. She'll need to wear a tiny cast for the next few weeks. The only way of ensuring Ash and Dan's survival is by recreating the pouch environment as closely as possible. They still can't be exposed to heat or much light, and their pouch temperature needs to be kept steady at around 36 degrees, close to human body temperature. In Tasmania, Winnie's joey is reaching the 6-month mark and is no longer hidden from view. Even though her pouch has expanded, the joey is now running out of space. The muscle around the pouch opening can no longer close, so the joey's feet are hanging out. Wombat joeys will either lie hunched over so that the feet protrude from the opening, or on their front looking out. The joey will start to investigate grass from the comfort of its protective hammock, while still feeding from the two teats inside the pouch. It's hard for Winnie to keep up her usual activity levels with such a heavy load, but she's got to maintain her burrow. She needs to line it with vegetation, as this is where her joey will spend its early days out of the pouch. In Cooma, in New South Wales, rescued babies Ash and Dan are still tucked up warmly inside. They're now around 5.5 and 6 months old. Dan is at the age when he might peep out of his mother's pouch. By the 6th month, he has fine fur covering much of his body. Ash's is beginning to come in too. They only need feeding every 4 hours now. And while they're still too young to go out, they're beginning to explore. Before her fur grows, Ash's tail is clearly visible. This gets tucked right down once the wombat is fully grown. They still both have huge ears. And their noses, which give them their name, bare-nosed, are still pink, but becoming more defined. The nose of a bare-nosed wombat has a covering of thick, bare skin, which should be dry if the wombat is in good health. The young wombats are only awake for half an hour at a time, and after a bout of exploration and play, they're ready for another nap. A joey leaves its mum's pouch permanently at around 9 months. It's kept in the burrow until it weighs at least 6.5 kilos. Before that, it's too vulnerable to potential predators. In Narrantapoo National Park in Tasmania, several joeys are now out and about on the pasture. This is the at-heel stage. A joey may stay with its mother in and out of the burrow for up to another 8 to 10 months, until it's fully independent. An at-heel joey now eats plenty of grass, but will continue to suckle from its mum until it's about 15 months old. The young wombat's digestive system has to adjust to the tough, fibrous grass. So it eats dirt or mum's scats to establish the right plant-digesting bacteria in its gut. During this stage, the joey is still dependent on its mum, both for guidance and protection. It sticks closely to her heels as she moves about, often not breaking contact. During the months before weaning, the young wombat spends much of its time in or very near a burrow. These wombats share their rocky burrow in nearby woodland with mice. When the time comes to forage, the mother wombat comes out first. She takes her time, dozing at the entrance. But young joeys can be nervous about coming out. Unlike these sociable white-winged choughs, which are on the hunt for insects. The joey's unsure of them and turns back. Eventually, Mum goes back in to coax him out. She needs to feed. But the joey is still hesitant. After being raised in the dark confines of the burrow, young joeys often startle easily. With such acute senses of both smell and hearing, there are many new sounds and smells to take in, which can frighten them. Finally, he's out and they can head off together. He stays close to Mum's heels and keeps his head down when they have to pass some curious kangaroos with joeys of their own. Nearby, Winnie waits patiently for her joey, Fred, to come out too. It's September and the weather has warmed up. There's good foraging near to the burrow. Fred has changed enormously. 2 months after leaving the pouch, he's put on about 3.5 kilos. He now has thick fur. His skull has broadened out and his snout is less pointed. His ears are more in proportion with his head. At 12 months, these will stop growing completely. He's also very uncertain. Winnie bides her time. When Fred appears, he sticks to Mum. He ducks underneath her frequently while she forages. He still takes milk from her pouch and tries to go underneath her to feed. Her teeth can elongate to extend right out of her pouch. As his confidence increases, so does his playfulness. A young wombat will often play with its mum, nip at her and climb on her back. Wherever Winnie goes, Fred follows. He practices climbing over fallen branches and rocks as Mum forages. She may eat soft green moss and bark as well as grasses. And when she decides to call it a day, he's first back inside. At the Wombat Sanctuary in Cooma, New South Wales, Ash and Dan are fatter and stronger. They're finally reaching the age when young wombats might leave their mother's pouches for the first time. At 7 and 7.5 months, the two joeys have fine fur. Once fully grown, their coats will be coarse with thick, bristly hair on their backsides. A wombat may be a slow-moving creature, but these two youngsters can wrestle and play vigorously. But unlike a wild wombat like Fred, they don't have mothers to teach them wombat ways. So everything they learn about wombat behaviour is from each other. A young wombat doesn't usually leave its mother until it's at least 16 kilos. But out on the pasture in Tasmania is one youngster who's only about 9 kilos. He's too small to be on his own. It's likely that he's an orphan, although he's been weaned and is eating grass. The patch of worn fur on his flank is a sign of a skin disease caused by mites called sarcoptic mange. This highly contagious condition is increasingly affecting common wombats. Mites can be introduced into the burrows by dogs or foxes. Infected wombats then pass the mites on to each other. His mother may have died from the same illness, or she may have rejected him if she's in a weakened state herself. But without a mother to defend him from predators, the young wombat is vulnerable. He moves very slowly, and although there's plenty of grass, he doesn't eat much. It may take him longer to feed. Left untreated, his chances of survival are slim. But researchers here in Narrantapoo are starting a treatment program, putting medication into the wombats' burrows. so he'll have a chance of better health as an independent wombat. Between 12 and 15 months after birth, the young wombat is weaned. But Mother and Joey usually stay close for a few more months after weaning. It can take as long as a year for the young wombat to become truly independent and start life on its own. A wombat female won't breed again until this happens, so most will likely only have a joey roughly every 2 years. In the woods near Cooma, New South Wales, not far from where Ash and Dan were found, a mother is out with her at-heel joey. It's cool, dank weather, so they're foraging by day. The joey is at the stage of testing his independence, straying a little further from Mum. Mums with older young at heel will let their youngsters explore, leaving the joeys to make sure they don't get lost. He needs to take care as he's still small enough to be predated by a dog or even a fox. He moves further away as the rain starts to intensify. Meanwhile, Mum takes shelter. Now the joey can't find his mother. He heads for a burrow. But it's not the right one. He makes a panicky dash before he finds the right spot. Mum gives him a reassuring nuzzle, and they shelter from the rain together. Perhaps he'll put off independence for another day. Once independent of its mother, the young wombat must search for a burrow of its own, either by finding an existing one or by getting down to some digging. But sometimes Mum will leave her joey with the burrow and move on herself. Researchers see this as a maternal investment, as it provides a starter home for a young wombat who might otherwise find it hard to establish a burrow of its own. By the time a young wombat is 2 years old, it weighs about 21 kilos. Its face and head are broad. It's found a home range and is sexually mature, ready to start the cycle again. In Cooma, New South Wales, orphan wombats Ash and Dan are finally big enough to go outside. At 10 and 10.5 months, they're still too small to be released into the wild. But they're getting some practice in for when they need to create burrows of their own. Digging seems to come naturally to Ash, even if Dan is butting in. The two joeys are now at the stage when they would be at heel with their mothers. It's an exciting new world to explore, but like any other at-heel joeys, they instinctively stick close to their surrogate mum, as well as to each other. They won't be ready to go free until they're between 20 and 25 kilos, large enough to fend for themselves. But when the time comes, Ash and Dan will be released together to start their lives as adult wombats. Being together means it's less likely they'll have any trouble leaving the humans who've raised them. As they reach sexual maturity, Ash and Dan will eventually move apart to become solitary. But there's even a chance that in the future they could breed together and create another generation of wombats. They've come so far already and have survived through the most vulnerable and extraordinary first year of the joey's journey.